Learn what a good deal looks like and then learn how to go find those good deals, right? I use mail and I use cold callers, right? But there's more strategies. You can cold call, you can hire a cold caller, you can do text messages, you can do direct mail, you can door knock, right? You can have an agent look at expired listings on them. Like there's tons of ways to find potential deals.
Do we just mail to every house in town, or do we get somewhat targeted?
Yeah, you want to get somewhat targeted, right? Because we talked about it earlier, right? When you're buying a house for under market value, then somebody has to be willing to sell you a house for less than what it's worth.
Hi, everybody. This is Jose Luis Morales. Welcome back to the Residual Real Estate Agent Show. Today we've got Henry Washington. He is a real estate investor. He's based out of Arkansas. Does some buy and hold, small multi-unit properties, also buys and flips, and does a little bit of everything. Today is actually the first episode where we have a co-host as well too. His name is Aaron Novello, been a big mentor of mine, and we are testing something out to see how the crowd likes Aaron. So welcome to the show, Henry. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And I already like Aaron, so I don't know if that counts, but...
Appreciate it, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's 1 point for you, Aaron, right there. Let's just get started. Who is Henry Washington, and how did you get involved in investing in real estate?
Well, Henry's the coolest guy I know. So my name's Henry. Thank you so much, man. I started investing 4 years ago, man. So it hasn't been too long, and I got into it because I had a panic attack. I got let's rewind. So about 10 years ago, I moved to the Arkansas area to work for Walmart. They're headquartered here. And I was doing software development and data analytics, and I had a good job making six figures. And I was single, and so I didn't have any financial education really. And so I just kind of spent what I made. I had enough to pay my bills, and then I spent everything else. I didn't really save anything. And that was okay for me, single. And then what happened was I met a lady and got married. And we got married literally 1 year to the day that we met. And so that's a quick shift, like not just in terms of like getting married, but also in terms of like the mindset it takes to be married, right? And so, I was in this place where I would get paid, pay my bills, spend everything else, and then run out of money just in time to get paid again, right? And that's all fine and good when it's just you, but then when you have more than just you to worry about, like I quickly learned that like my wife wasn't cool with that strategy, so I had to figure something else out. I really had two wake up calls, man. The first one came when we tried to buy our first house together, and we applied for the loan, and the lender basically said, "Hey, we'd love to lend to your wife as long as you're not on the loan," because my credit was so bad that they were like, "You're just going to hurt more than you're going to help. So we don't, like, if you guys want to do this, you can't be on the loan." And that was like a big blow to the ego. I'm a six-figure earner. I think I'm this big shot, right? And then, like I can't even help buy the house that, we're going to live in, our first home. And then, so that was a blow. And then the next wake-up call came, literal wake-up call came. My wife and I were laying in bed having a conversation about our future, as you do as a young married couple. And we talked about, how many kids we were going to have and what kind of dream home we were going to have and where that was going to be and what it was going to look like. And I'm just sitting here thinking in the back of my mind, like, man, we barely got here. Like, how am I going to afford a dream home? Like, this is like, I had $1,000 in my savings account. That's all I had as backup money. And it was just a punch in the gut, man. I can still literally feel, like when I talk about it, I still feel kind of that feeling that I felt that night, because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to provide her the life that she deserves, right? She didn't make these poor financial decisions. I did. And so I woke up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, having a panic attack. And I did what any normal person does when you are panicking about money at 3 a.m. is I started to Google, how can I make some more money? And I found a bunch of articles about real estate and Bigger Pockets articles. And like, I had never considered real estate an option just because of I barely got on the loan for the first house we got. And I just thought wealthy people owned real estate that wasn't their own home. Like people owned vacation homes, and then people that owned shopping centers, they were all rich people, right? I just didn't think that that was something normal people did. And then I saw this TED Talk, and it was this kid who was 20 something years old. He had 20 something houses, and the TED Talk was called How to Design Your Dream Life Through Passive Income. And, when you're panicking about money and you see something like that, you're like, yep, that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to watch that video. And he talked about being financially free with the 25 or 23 rentals that he had. And it just made it sound achievable. And that was the first time I'd seen just like a normal person like achieve something like that, or the first time I paid attention to it. And I just made a decision at that point, like literally at 3 a.m. I was like, you know what? If he can figure this out, I can figure this out. So I'm just going to figure out how to be a successful real estate investor. And like once I made that decision at 3 a.m, I felt comfortable and I went back to sleep. And the next day I told a friend I was going to be this real estate investor. She was a broker and she was like, that's awesome. And she gave me a box of books. And one of those books was, guess which one? I'll give you guys a guess.
I'd probably say Rich Dad, Poor Dad, maybe.
Nailed it on the head, right? So I picked Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Of all the books there, that's just the one I picked because the title sounded familiar, and read that. And then I knew I made the right choice. And I'd say between that point and then 90 days later is when I bought my first property. So I just went in, man.
Congratulations, man. What did that first property look like? Was it single family? Was it a multi? How did you finance it?
Yeah, I'll give you all the deets, man. So it was a single family built in the 90s, early 90s, ranch house. I found it because, so there were a couple of things that I did that helped me like get a successful start. One I already mentioned, which was I decided to be a successful investor. And I didn't know how powerful that was when I was doing it, but it's now that I've had a chance to reflect, right? I've seen that like when we decide on something, anybody, right? Like your brain just goes into figure it out mode, right? Every time a problem comes up, your brain is already trying to figure out how to get around it because you decided you were going to be good at this thing, right? And I didn't say I was going to try. I didn't say I was going to give it a go. I said, I'm going to figure out how to be successful. And so that was super helpful in the journey. Did you want to jump in there? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, it's so interesting because as you were saying this, the suffix "ide,"
Yeah.
it means to kill off. So homicide, suicide, that's to kill. So you killed off any other option. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's perfect. I never even thought about it that way, but that's 100% what happens. And you see a lot of these new investors, they say, well, I'm going to give it a try. I'll see how it goes, right? I'll try to figure it out. That's different. Like that doesn't do the same thing mentally for you. And so when they bump into barriers, they're more likely to quit. And so one, I made a decision. Two, I didn't know how I was going to do it because I had bad credit and only $1,000 in my savings account, right? But I didn't let that stop me. And so I just said, all right, well, clearly people are doing this because everywhere you look, there's a house and somebody owns it. So let me find out how to get around the people that do this. And I just started looking for like groups and meetups. I didn't know RIAs were a thing. Like I knew none of that. I just started Googling like real estate investors, groups, meetups. And I saw these RIA groups and I was like, I don't know what that is, but I'm going. And so I just put myself around investors and then just found this group and groups of people. Like you guys know, like investors, they don't mind being helpful. Like there's enough houses for everybody. So they were open with information. And so I started to learn how the next step was going to come just by being around other people. And so that's how I found the first deal. And the third thing I did was I started telling people I was a real estate investor, right? I didn't know how I was going to do it. I had no money, but I knew, like, I've always believed that in this world, you get what you give, right? Whatever you put out, that's what you get back. And so I was like, I'm just going to start telling people I'm an investor because if I don't believe it, why should anybody else believe it? And so the combination of those three things is what helped me go to my first deal. It was a word of mouth deal because I was telling people I was an investor. A buddy of mine was in a tough situation with a house that he owned. He had to sell it in 4 weeks time to get an amount of money to go buy this property from his church. that they were going to use for the church. So it was very, very important to him to buy this property. He had to sell his house to do that, and he needed a certain amount of money. And so he said, "Hey, the house is worth 150. I'll sell it to you for 115. I just need this amount of money to do what I got to do. As long as you can buy it in 30 days, you can have it for 115." And I was like, "Done. I'll buy it." Had no clue how to do that. Had no money to do it, but I was just like, I'm going to figure it out. And so that's how I found the first deal. Single family. It was a rental. And the way that we financed it was we used a small local bank that covered 85% of the purchase price, and they wanted a 15% down payment. That equated to about $21,000. I had one, so I had to come up with the other $19,000 to $20,000 in 4 weeks. But because I surrounded myself with that group of investors, I was able to go to them and say, like, I have this deal. How are you guys doing this? And one of my buddies now, he's a business partner now, but he was an investor that I was just in contact with back then. He was like, "Well, you can borrow against a 401k." And I was like, "I don't want to cash out a 401k. That's the crazy taxes." He was like, "No, you can borrow against it, and you make payments, but the payments are interest. The payments are with interest back to you because it's your money." And I was like, "For real?" But remember, I was bad with money, so I didn't have one of those, but my wife did. So I went to my wife and I was like, "Remember when I said we were going to buy real estate? Well, I need to borrow about $20,000 out of your 401k for us to do this thing." And she was on board the whole time, never questioned it, was like, "Just say less, let's do it." And so we borrowed that money, we bought the asset, we raised the rent, the property cash flowed, the cash flow helped pay back the 401k, which was our own money, and the interest went back to us. And so I went from not knowing what to do about money, and then 90 days later I had this cash flowing asset, and then the bank told me, they were like, "Hey, do you want to take a line of credit out on the equity you have in this property so you have some cash to do some more deals?" And I was like, "Yeah," right? Like I didn't know that was a thing. And so then I had access to like another 20 something thousand dollars to go do another deal. And like when you're panicking about money and how to like take care of your family and provide you what they want, and 90 days later you own an asset that's paying you, and then the bank gives you access to another 20 grand to do it again, like that's mind blowing. And so like at that point, I just knew. I was like, well, at that point our goals were to do one house a year for like 5 years. And I said, well, that's silly. So we need to do as many as we can, because this is such a powerful strategy that I just wasn't aware of how powerful it was.
That's awesome. Just to give our viewers a little teaser of where you're at today, you mind fast forwarding what it looks like now, just so that they're looking at some of the interview in advance?
Yeah, absolutely. So now we're sitting at, I think I looked today, we're sitting right at about 70 doors. I closed on 3 yesterday. And then I've got another 10 under contract. So we're moving.
And I guess I'm wondering, because you mentioned something that was interesting to me, is that at the beginning, you didn't see yourself as someone who can do that. And this idea of kind of self-image. And I'm aware that self-image can either be empowering or disempowering. So how powerful was it for you to get that example of that young person doing that, which caused you to believe like, hey, I think I could do that too?
No, it was huge, man. Because, I had never even considered being a landlord as an option before. There were 2 things that helped. That, yes, seeing somebody who just seemed like a normal guy, right? Like, he didn't seem like this guy who had $1 bajillion and then bought some property with his $1 bajillion and now he had $2 bajillion, right? It didn't seem like that situation. And so I was like, it was like a light bulb went, a switch turned on in my head and was like, oh, go do that, right? Like if he did that, you could do that, right? And so the representation, yes, absolutely, is what made me feel like this was achievable, even though I didn't have the how laid out in front of me. The other thing that helped was my pops, man. He was a high school art teacher, and so like super talented artist. And but teacher salaries, they're not the best, and so he always had a side gig, just because my dad loved like taking us on vacation and like doing all these super cool things with us. And so he always had a side gig. He used to grow plants at home and then take them to the swap meet and sell them. He owned an arcade back when you used to have to like leave your house and go to a place to play cool video games. And he owned a barbecue restaurant for about 10 years when I was a kid. So I kind of grew up in this barbecue restaurant. And so I got to see my father be an entrepreneur and have side hustles. And we never talked about like, me being an entrepreneur. Like my dad and I never had those conversations, but like I saw successful implementation of somebody who looked like me being able to have a side business and make extra income and then use that to help his family. And so like when it came time for me to start a business, I never thought I couldn't do it. And I never thought I couldn't be successful. I thought exactly the opposite because I had this example of it my whole life.
As you grew from buying your first deal to growing a portfolio in excess of 70 units, what are some of the challenges that kind of you arised along the way? And was there ever a time where maybe you felt like maybe throwing in the towel, maybe like, hey, look, this isn't going to work out?
Like today or like this week or whatever? No, yeah, man. So I'd say the first kind of challenge, I've always been a kind of ready, fire, aim guy. And so that is a blessing and a curse sometimes. And so I'd say the first real like wake up call came when we bought like our first multi-unit deal, over 2 units. And so I bought 8 units, 4 duplexes, and they were in shoddy condition. And we just had a heck of a time trying to get contractors that would take on the job at that time. And we had a heck of a time with, we had, didn't set aside enough money to complete the renovations because you don't know what you don't know, right? We'd only done a few renovations and most of those were still in progress because we were so new. It's not like we had completed a bunch of renovations. And so like underestimated the work. And so then you're going back to the bank and asking for more, money to do work. And those were stressful times. And I would say that is probably one of the most difficult parts of this business that isn't talked about enough, is that like, yes, you need to figure out, how to find great deals. And yes, you need to figure out how to get those deals financed. But if you're buying distressed properties, you got to get them renovated. And working with contractors sometimes is an art and a science and an art again. And so it's tough. And we took our bumps like anybody else. That contractors, walk out on the job and threaten to file liens and not do work that we paid them for and take our money and run. Like I've got all those same horror stories. And so we got beat up like that along the way. And then right now, I'd say one of the biggest lumps I'm taking right now is I got an 8-unit property that I bought in January 1, 2020, right? And so what happened in March 2020, and that just it tanked my project from the perspective of materials skyrocketed and work was hard to find. And so I'm just now finishing up the renovation on that, like right now. So it's still vacant, right? So been kicking my butt for a couple of years. And, what we budgeted to renovate it literally tripled because of the pandemic and the shortage.
Yeah. So, and I guess I'm wondering for you in terms of continuing to evolve and grow. So we went from 1 unit to 70 doors. And my professional experience is that it's still an internal evolution. Mm-hmm. So for you personally, like, what is it that you're currently working on, or a challenge in terms of that internal evolution as you get into bigger projects, more doors, multifamily, that sort of thing?
Yeah, man, that's a phenomenal question. Because I've kind of hit this point, when you're new and you're digging in and you're buying deals, you're like, the numbers work, it's a deal, buy it, right? And then sometimes you buy something and then you realize that, hey, like, even on a property like this, if the numbers work, I'm going to stay away from it, right? So I had to learn what I don't want to buy. And I would like to think that I'm pretty clear now on what I want to own and what I don't want to own. I have an asset that it's my largest asset, but it's in probably the worst neighborhood of any of my assets. And it's in a market a little outside of my market, right? And so I bought it because if it's full, it's a cash flow monster. But even with it being full, like what I'm dealing with are tenants who are probably always going to struggle to pay, and who, if I do have to put them out, I'm not sure that they have anywhere else to go, right? And just like, I don't necessarily feel comfortable with that, right? Like, not that they're not good people. Some of them are amazing people, right? But I don't know that I want to be the gatekeeper between somebody having a roof over their head and not having a roof over their head at all, right? And no matter how, pretty I make that property, right, it's always going to cater to that tenant class. And I just don't know that that's what I want my tenant makeup to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Right. So I had to learn that lesson. And then the other lesson I learned is that, so I've dabbled in, single family, small multis, and then I played in the large multifamily space, but not as an owner. More, I worked for a fund who raised money and then bought complexes all across the country. Like that was my day job for a year before I retired. And what I learned through that process was that once you cross over into that large multifamily space, it's less of a people business and more about the P&L. It's where can we reduce expenses? How can we increase income? That NOI has to look good so that we can turn these properties over for a profit, or that income statement always looks phenomenal. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be like that. These are businesses. They're many businesses, each one that you own, right? And you obviously want to make sure that they're functioning at their highest and best capacity. But it takes away from the people aspect of the business. And I'm just a people guy, man. I just love the impact that I have on my community in the single family and small multifamily space. I love driving by and seeing yards and houses, seeing kids playing in yards of houses that I renovated, and taking something that either wasn't occupied or was an eyesore, turning it into housing that the people that are in that neighborhood don't get priced out of. They get to still buy that asset, man, and that just makes me feel good. You lose that when you go super big.
Yeah, so that's really awesome. Like, as most people pursue a journey of financial freedom, sometimes they can lose track and focus about like what's in alignment for them and what brings them energy. And it sounds like, having achieved a certain amount of success, you're beginning to notice what brings me energy and what lights me up.
Yes, man, at 100%.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
How has your role changed from like when you were buying the first unit to now? Like, is it a one-man team, husband and wife team?
So on that side of the business, yeah. So I'm still acquisitions, and my wife is property management, and I've got a virtual assistant. I've got a kind of like a live-in assistant. Our sister-in-law works for us, and she kind of does all the dirty work, and she does all the stuff that she probably doesn't want to do, but be lost without her, kind of a thing.
What does it look like from the acquisitions part? Because obviously that's important for viewers and for somebody looking to get started. What does a day-to-day look like for you there?
Yeah, so for me, it's marketing that I pretty much have on autopilot at this point. And so I've got, lists pulled. I mostly do direct mail. I've got it outsourced, so a third party sends my mail. They know how much I want to send every week, and so they send mail. I've got 2 or 3 people who drive for me for driving for dollars, and they're identifying leads, and kind of that puts on autopilot. And so really, I just wait for the phone to ring. I answer calls. I set appointments, and then I make offers typically on the spot. And it's not a ton of leads all the time, man. We've got it pretty dialed in.
And then I'm wondering, is your intention at some point to work yourself out of acquisitions, or do you enjoy that piece of the business and you want to do it?
I love it. No, I'm scaling now. So what I'm trying to do is force myself to hire somebody to help with acquisitions, because I know I won't just go do it. Like I need to be overwhelmed and then go do it. And so I've increased marketing this year to like double than what I had last year. And, I'll probably bring somebody in to help, but I just love this part of the business, man. It's just, I get to touch the people, man. I love it.
Are most of your deals now, the buy and hold and the flips, coming from direct to owner type of marketing, or are some of them coming through like relationships with like other brokers or relationships with just people in the community?
I would say 90% come from direct to seller, and maybe about 10% have come through relationships or realtors. Or I think I've only done like 2 deals on market. Most of the deals that come from realtors are pocket listings, but yeah, I'd say it's about 90% direct to seller.
Yeah, and I'm aware too, like in order to elevate, usually I have to let go of something.
Mm-hmm.
So my question for you is, brother, having been exceptionally successful already, for you to continue to elevate and to be able, because I think as we grow more, we can give more. And it sounds like you have a heart for like giving people really good spaces to live in. So what would you need to let go of in order to be able to give more to more people?
Yeah, man, I don't have the answer for that right now. I know that I know it's coming. I don't know what it looks like yet. And I just, I'm a believer, man. I'm a Christian, and I just believe that, you know, God's pointing me in a direction that He wants me to go, and I'm trying to walk down that path. And then as I walk down that path, I'm trying to listen to what He wants me to do. And I know that I'm going to have to let go of something, probably something that I enjoy doing, so that I can fulfill some higher purpose that I have. I just don't know what it is yet. But I have let go of parts of the business that I don't enjoy. I still feel like I'm supposed to be touching the people in my community right now in this way. And when it's going to evolve, I'm open to it. But yeah, I totally am 100% in agreement with you. I know it's coming.
What is the vision for you for the next couple of years?
Here's the other question you're supposed to have a sexy answer for that I don't necessarily have one for. Yeah, for me, man, I tell people I'm gonna buy property until God or my wife tells me I need to stop. But the goal is, so I kind of I'm taking this approach where it's like you build the business, right, which is what we've been doing mostly through leverage, right? And then it's protect what you have, right? Get as bulletproof as possible. And then from there, you can keep going in a direction that you want to go once you've got this pocket of it that's protected. And so my goal is when I get to around 100 doors, I'm going to look pretty hard at my portfolio, especially if the market's still as hot as it is right now, and see, what percentage of that portfolio can I sell to pay off the majority of the rest of it? Because then I'll always be bulletproof on that portion of my portfolio. If I can sell 30 and keep 70 paid off, that's amazing. If I can sell 50 and have 50 paid off, 50 paid off is better than 100 leveraged. It's going to pay me better than 100 leveraged. It's going to be less work than 100 leveraged. And they'll always be there. They'll always be there to take care of me, my family, my kids, their kids, as long as they don't sell them. Hopefully I raise them right out. But then I've always got this pocket of properties that's that generational wealth that takes care of my family. And then I can still grow via leverage, but I'll always have this portion of property that's no one can take from me.
As a result of this journey that you've kind of gone through, from not having enough for next month's bills at times, just having just enough, to now obviously owning 70, what are some of the different changes as it relates to money that you've had to make, or as it relates to finances, or maybe even lessons as it relates to money and finance that you've kind of learned along the way?
Yeah, man. The first lessons I learned were all the old adages that, people told you and you just don't listen to until you're in that headspace. So, I never paid myself first before I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and The Richest Man in Babylon. And, from that point forward, I was always putting away 10% and then figuring out how to make the rest work, right? Again, that mindset really helped, because when you pay yourself first and you got to go figure out how to make the rest work, then your brain starts working, right? So I picked up some side hustles to make more money and some other things. So paying myself first was huge when I got started. And then I fixed my credit, man. And I wasn't smart with my credit before, and so obviously smarter with my credit now, but I had to go learn what credit is and how it works so that I can not screw it up again, right? And I had to go pay some stuff, right? And I think that's what people struggle with, is they're like, my credit's bad and I want to fix it. But yeah, you want to fix it, but you want to fix it without having to pay what you need to pay, right? Like, that's different. Like, I had to go pay some stuff, right? And which made me go figure out how to make some extra money to go pay some of the things that were hurting my credit. Because at the end of the day, if something that cost me $1,000 was hurting my credit and keeping me from buying an asset that's going to pay me tens of thousands of dollars over every year forever, right? Like, you figure out how to pay the $1,000, right? And so I had to pay some stuff, right? So from a financial perspective, those are the things that kind of the foundation that I laid. And then tithing, right? I always try to make sure that there's giving built in to whatever we're doing. And so I like doing stuff. I don't think people realize how, and I know it's not supposed to be like this, but I don't think people realize how good it feels to give, right? I don't think people realize how good it feels to be a blessing to other people. And so I just always try to keep my eyes, ears, and heart open to people who may need help. And I just try to step in and help when I can. I carry a little bit of cash on me all the time, and not because I need cash for anything, but just so that I can give it away if the situation calls for it, right? If I need to pay for somebody's groceries, if I need to help somebody, get a ride somewhere or something, I always just keep cash so that, if a situation calls for it, I can hand somebody some money to help them in a situation. So giving's a foundation for me.
And I love that, brother, because I think a lot of folks in this space can be kind of very about what's in it for me and very flashy with, what they're doing. And one of the things that me and Jose would talk about at the beginning of his career is that when you become a blessing in somebody's life, your life gets blessed in return. And one of those blessings is money, but other ones is appreciation, kindness, like thankfulness. So it's awesome to hear that that's part of your strategy. And what I'm aware of is that love and kindness is a business strategy that's almost not beatable.
It is 1,000% the best business strategy. And, I try to tell people that all the time. Some people get it, some people don't get it, but it's ingrained in my actual business. I quickly learned that, obviously as an investor, you're buying under market value. So you're probably buying a problem. And if somebody has a problem, you buying it is helping them. And so it quickly helped me realize that I need to stop walking into these houses and trying to figure out how to close a deal, and just walk into these houses and figure out how I can help this person. They're reaching out to me because they need help. They may not want to sell their house, right? And I'm okay with that. And so I just approach every situation as how can I be of service to you? And if I can be of service to you and help you solve your problem, and it doesn't involve me buying your house, then I'm going to do everything I can to do that. And we do that all the time. I've walked into a house. I had a house tour. This lady found me on my website and asked me to come look at her property. So I didn't send her marketing. She found me. She wanted me to come look at her property. And then I get there and she wants me to make her an offer. But all on the tour, her body language and tone suggested that she didn't want to sell her house. But she kept asking me what my offer was. And when we sat down and got to negotiation time, I said, look, I can make you an offer, but it doesn't feel like that's what you want me to do. What do you want to sell the house? And she just kind of, broke down and told me the situation. And they were behind on payments. This was pre-COVID, so they were foreclosing on people's properties, and they were doing it promptly. And she was behind on payments, and they didn't want to sell their house, but they didn't want to lose it either. And so they said they were looking to sell it so that they didn't lose what they had. And so I said, all right, well, so it doesn't sound like you need to sell. It sounds like you need time. And so I asked her for her mortgage statement and her utility bills, and I looked at them, and I called her mortgage company, and I paid her mortgage for 2 months, and then I paid her utilities for 2 months to buy her some time to help get back on her feet, because that's what I feel like she needed. And it didn't break the bank for me to do that. And no, it wasn't the best, like financially on the books, it doesn't make sense, but it sure made sense right here, right in my heart. And so that's what I'm supposed to do. I can't make money off my community and then not be of service to my community. I just can't sleep at night if I don't do that.
And the cool thing about that story is, and a lot of people don't realize that, is that the more you give sometimes, and not expecting something in return, but sometimes it's the more you receive. When you go about business that way, I'm sure that lady is extremely appreciative. And that lady, my philosophy on it is, even if it doesn't turn into money right then and there, it turns into something positive. Whether you just help that lady, you basically change her life, right there with being a blessing in her life. And kudos to you for doing that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, man. People business, man. People first, real estate second.
So I've got a question. So a lot of people think that they can't get started in investing in real estate, but because they don't have any money. And at the beginning of your career, obviously you made certain commitments first. What would you say to that? And what would be different ways that people can go about maybe financing deals or maybe getting creative with like JVs or that sort of thing?
Yeah, man. So what I did was, as I was around these investors that I told you, I didn't know how to get started, so I just got around people who were doing it. The theme I noticed was that every meeting, everybody said, "I'm an investor, I'm a buyer, but there's no deals to be found." Right? Nobody could find deals, and so I was like, all right, well, if I can go find these deals everybody's looking for, then I'll always be able to make money. And so what that did is it forced me to put on the blinders, and again, didn't realize that's what was happening then. But the hindsight now, real estate's so flexible, and people can get the squirrel syndrome because they're like, oh, I heard about owner finance, and then I heard about subject to, and then I heard about wholesaling, and so they're running down all these paths, trying to run down all these paths at once, right? And they get overwhelmed and confused when at the end of the day, what's important in real estate is buying a property right. Because if you buy a property right, disposition's easy. You can make money on it however you want to if you buy it right. And the foundation of every disposition strategy is having enough equity in it to make money, right? And so it doesn't matter if you want to flip, wholesale, hotel, Airbnb, right? You have to have purchased it properly. And so because I was so focused on finding these deals, because I felt like that's what other investors were looking for, and if I can find them, A, I can help them, B, I can make money, I put on these blinders, and that's all I did. And so once I found a deal, I was then forced to go figure out the rest. Like, because once I got a deal under contract, I was like, oh, snap, I only have $1,000. I got to go find the rest of this money. And then I did, right? No, snap, I got to go find a lender. And then I did, right? And then I got to go find a contractor. And then all those things that only matter once you have a deal, I was so motivated to get done because I wasn't distracted by them prior to having a deal under contract, right? I was just focused on the deal. And so I tell new investors, like, put the blinders on, go figure out what a good deal looks like in your market, and then go figure out how you're going to find those good deals. Implement that strategy, stick with it relentlessly and consistently until you get a deal. And once you get that deal on the hook, if it's truly a deal, you'll be able to monetize it, whether you wholesale it to another investor, whether you want to take it down as a buy and hold. Even if you feel like you don't have money, having money is the easy part. Finding the deal is harder. If your deal's good, people will throw money at you. People will want to partner with you. Like, if you got a good deal and you go to an investor and say, hey, I got this deal, I don't have the money to take it down, would you 50-50 with me on it? And 50% of a great deal? Yeah, man, come on, let's do it.
I'm doing that right now where somebody brought me a deal and they're like, hey, look, would you 50-50 the profit with me? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. That was a deal that I didn't have access to, you know?
Right, 100%. So I tell them, don't worry about the money because you need money to buy a deal. If you don't have a deal, you don't need money. So go solve the first problem first.
Yeah, and the main takeaway there for me is like commit first and you'll figure out the rest later. You get exceptionally creative once you've committed.
Yes, absolutely. You don't want to lose that. You don't want to lose that thing you've been working so hard to get.
So to finance the rest of the deals that you've bought, how have you gone about financing them? Have you been using the 401k? Have you been using equity lines of credit? What does that look like?
The first deal that I did was with a small local bank, and that wasn't a strategy that I knew was a strategy on the front side. It was just like, I need money, go to a bank, right? And it was a relationship with a bank that another investor that I worked with had, and I was able to take down that property. We used a commercial loan from a small local bank, and once I bought that deal, they were like, well, bring us more deals. And then and told you that bank was like, hey, we'll let you take out a line of credit on that equity. And so after doing a few deals and starting to research kind of what was happening, these small local banks, they have loan products that are built for real estate investors, right? They call them fix and flip loans, right? They have product. They need business from small local businesses in order to stay afloat, right? They need deposits from local businesses. The big banks, the Bank of Americas, the Chase banks, all those guys, they make their money doing 30-year fixed rate mortgages, conventional mortgages, FHAs, and then they sell them off, right? And they're doing that for everybody. That's what they do. But these small banks, they don't get the same volume of those that those banks get, and they depend on loaning to small businesses. And so they need you, which is a benefit to you. They have products that are built for what you do, which is a benefit to you. And they don't sell their loans. They keep them in-house. And so that allows them to be more flexible with the rates and the terms that they give you in order to help you. And so you can really create this win-win situation where you're consistently bringing them business that they feel comfortable with, right? I'm an investor. I'm buying these properties under market value. They want all of those because there's not much risk in it for them. Because if I foreclose on a loan on a house that I'm buying for $50,000 that's worth $150,000, if they have to take that asset from me, they can go sell that at a discount and make way more money than they would have made from the interest payments I'm making on that $50,000. Like, they're comfortable loaning to me and they want me to do more of that. And because they want my business and my deposits, and because my deals are comfortable for them, like, we're able to come up with favorable financing terms. And so most of my deals, I get 100% financed through that small local bank. And I have some other banks where you have to put a little more down, but each bank is like a different tool in the tool belt used for a different situation. And so a lot of people don't realize that small local banks and these commercial loans are viable options for them. And they're cheap money typically. The interest rates are not as low as if you're going to buy a personal home to live in, but they're only typically about a point higher. And the origination fees aren't very high, and they're super flexible banks, man. So I've leveraged those banks in order to grow my portfolio because some of them don't require much of a down payment, and so less money out of my pocket means I have more money to go do more deals, do more marketing, and so I can scale quicker. If the banks aren't requiring me to put a bunch of money down, then the only thing stopping me from growing is deal flow.
That's awesome. So it leads to the next question. I know that you said that you do a lot of direct to owner. If we were going to do direct mail, do we just mail to every house in town, or do we get somewhat targeted? And if we get targeted, what would you recommend for somebody out there to kind of do?
Yeah, man, phenomenal question. Yeah, you want to get somewhat targeted, right? Because we talked about it earlier, right? When you're buying a house for under market value, then somebody has to be willing to sell you a house for less than what it's worth, right? Quote unquote worth. It's not actually less than what it's worth, but. And so what that means is that person probably has some reason to sell at a discount. There's some level of distress or level of motivation that's causing them to want to just sell it quick and be done with it, right? And so you want to send your mail or your marketing to people who may be in that situation, because there's no 100% way to know just by pulling a list. But you want to try to market. Your list needs to have two things. It needs to be sent to people with equity, because if they don't have equity, there's no deal, right? If they owe 90 and the house is worth 100, right, you can't offer them 50 and they'll take it, right? But if they owe 20 and the house is worth 100, you can offer them 50, they make 30, right? It's much more likely that you'll get that deal. So they need to have equity and they need to have motivation. They need a reason to sell at a discount, right? And so there's tons of ways to market for motivation. There's divorces and inherited properties. I heard somebody put it, I wish I had it written down. Somebody put it the 5 Ds. It was like death, divorce, distress or something. It was, but I wrote them all down. I don't have them anymore. But I thought that was phenomenal, like the 5 Ds. But so you want to try to find that motivation. For me, I have the benefit now of having done multiple deals and being able to go back and look at those deals and seeing like what was the motivation for each one. And what I found that most of the deals that I've bought have been either owner occupied, but they've owned the house for at least 15 years or more, or they were non-owner occupied, but they were local still. So they were in the market. So they live in the state or the city, they just don't live in that property, but in the person's name. So no LLCs, just their name or living trusts. And those are typically like small scale landlords who've owned property for 15, 20, 30 years, and they're just getting out of the game. Tons of deals from people like that. So those are the two kind of motivating lists that have done the best for me in my market. But it is stuff like this is market specific. So you need to do some research about talk to other investors and see what's working for them in your market. Because that list and that motivation works here for me, it may not be like that where you are, right?
Yeah, it's funny because I do mainly retail, but I owned a 57 or doors down in Southern California. But one of the ways that I targeted sellers was I started looking at where every time I see a new listing, I check the tax records and then I looked for patterns. And then based on those patterns, I said, well, look, I'm noticing that everybody that's selling their property bought 3 years ago or 4 years ago. Let me pull that list of people that bought 2 or 3 years ago, because those are more likely people, which it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. You're kind of recognizing certain patterns and then targeting those patterns to be able to get enough deal flow.
100%.
Anything else that you feel that would be helpful for viewers, or anything else that you think that people would see value?
Yeah, man. We talked a little bit about like what we think people should focus on, right? So learning what a good deal is, and then going and figuring out how to find that good deal, right? And so to dive into that a little more, right? You learn what a good deal is in your market by getting around investors who are doing deals in your market, right? Go ask them. Go introduce yourself. Tell them you're a new investor. And just say, ask them about their last deal. So, what's a deal you're working on right now? Where'd you buy it? How much did it cost? Like, what are you doing with it? You flipping it? You renting it? What's the numbers? They'll tell you, right? And people ask me about deals. I'm glad to tell them about my deals. And you're going to do a couple of things while you're doing that. You're going to learn, all right, well, this is the neighborhood he's buying in. This is how much they're paying, right? And so if I'm going to be shopping in that neighborhood, I want to try to stay around this price point. This is how much they're spending on it, right? And you do that a few times with a few different people, you're going to start to notice some patterns, right? About what people are paying for certain properties, about how much they're putting into them, about what they're selling them for, renting them for. That's all great market information that you can use to go figure out how to find your own good deals. But you're also going to be building rapport with these investors who are doing deals, because people love talking about themselves and people love people that are interested in them, right? It's just human nature. And so now you're building a rapport and a friendship with somebody who could be a great asset to you if you have a deal to sell them or partner with them on. And you're getting this information that you need.
No, I was going to say not only that, but they could be a good source for money as well, too. And it's funny because I had never thought about it from that perspective until recently, that these real estate groups can actually be the people funding your deals, basically, if you have enough of a good deal.
Because you're doing the hard work, right? You're bringing them the thing that's going to make them money. You went and you did the work to find it. So, and it says something about you, that you go out and you do that hard work that they didn't have to go do. That, it's all building that rapport. And then you got to think too, these people, they don't always take down everything that they get from a lead perspective. They get busy. They get, too many deals going on, and they may look to liquidate a deal. And these people, they may not necessarily care that they're going to get the top dollar for a deal they're trying to liquidate. If you've built this relationship with them, they may just want to help you. And they may just say, hey, Henry, why don't you check out this deal, right? This might be something that's up your alley. And they'll pass you leads and deals, right? I've passed deals on to other investors, right, that I could have made more money on passing to somebody else, but wanted to help that person out. And other long-term investors who are getting out of the game have helped me, right? One of my best deals is an owner finance deal from an old landlord who just was like, loved what we were doing and was like, man, I want you guys to have this, right? And so, those relationships are important. And the other thing to focus on is, right, so learn how to find a good deal, and then learn what a good deal looks like, and then learn how to go find those good deals, right? I use mail and I use cold callers, right? But there's more strategies. You can cold call, you can hire a cold caller, you can do text messages, you can do direct mail, you can door knock, right? You can have an agent look at expired listings on them. Like, there's tons of ways to find potential deals. Pick the strategy, pick one strategy, and pick the one that fits your budget, meaning you can fund it appropriately. Like, for me, I send mail. If all I could afford to do was send 50 pieces of mail or 100 pieces of mail a month, then mail shouldn't be what I do. That's not enough mail that's going to bring me a deal anytime soon, right? I know that I need to send, at least in my market, I need to send at least 2,000 pieces of mail a month, right? And so I knew I could afford to do that. So I can afford to fund it appropriately, and it fits your personality. And what that means is, like, know yourself. I know that I hate cold calling. And so I'm not going to say I'm going to make 100 cold calls a day until I find a deal, because I'll make 2 and I'll get frustrated. and then I'll never make the amount that I need to make, right? Even if you lie to yourself and say, well, I'm gonna fight my way through it, and maybe you will, but are you gonna be good at it? Like, are you gonna want to do it? Like, you've got to build rapport with these people. Like, pick one that fits your person. Some people are just natural salespeople, and they can get on a cold call and they can have a best friend in about 3 minutes on the other end of the phone, right? But yeah, those people absolutely should like pick the strategy that fits your person, that you know you can stick with when it gets difficult. You do those two things, fund it appropriately, pick the one that you can stick with, and just hammer at it relentlessly and consistently until your deal comes. Because the profits from one deal can pay for months and months and months of marketing.
Absolutely, man. Last question I wanted to ask you, has anybody from either the real estate clubs or anybody else that you've met been like a personal mentor to you?
The first person who helped me determine that I could use a 401k to borrow, so he was an investor that I just had lunch with one day, and then we became friends through all of that process, and then we became business partners, and we owned 25 doors together. And we've since kind of gone our separate ways as far as like building our businesses separately, but we still own our 25 doors together and operate those together. And those 25 doors really came before I had a portfolio of my own. I maybe had 3 or 4 doors, and then he and I built a portfolio of about 25, and then we kind of went off and built our own portfolios outside of that. And so, if it wasn't for him and the relationship that I built with him, it would have been a lot slower go for me, for him too. But, we found a way to be a benefit to each other at a time when we both needed that. And it's been phenomenal.
So one of the main things for viewers, go out to these investor groups and talk to people, ask questions, take them out to lunch.
That's it, man. That's it.
Well, I want to say thank you for obviously being on the show. This was episode number 103. We had Henry Washington. Henry, if people wanted to get a hold of you, what would be the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, the best way to find me is on Instagram. I'm at the Henry Washington on Instagram. And my website is www.henrywashington.com. And I've got a free book there. And that book is exactly what we talked about with the small banks. So how to go talk to small banks and get optimal financing and how all that works.
Awesome, brother. Once again, thank you so much. For our viewers out there, if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that this episode will help a friend, family, neighbor, anybody like that, make sure to share this video with them. Once again, Henry, thank you so much. From the bottom of our heart, we enjoyed having you here today and kind of hearing the journey as to how you're building your portfolio, but also helping out your community.
Thank you so much, man. It's been a blast. I appreciate it.